What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed. And you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2 box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. On today's episode, I speak with Anodea Judith, who is a best-selling author and thought leader on the topics of the chakras, psychology, yoga, and social change. She's the director of the teaching organization Sacred Centers and holds a doctoral degree in human health, a master's in clinical psychology, and advanced yoga teacher certifications. Dr. Judith is the author of 9 definitive works on the chakras, best known for the classics Wheels of Life and Eastern Body, Western Mind, and her acclaimed book, Charge and the Energy Body, which takes you into the psychology of your life force. And her most recent work is focused on women's leadership called She Rises. I am so excited to welcome Anodea to the show. We've crossed paths a couple of times in the last 6 months, so it was extremely synchronistic, and I've just been such a big fan of her work. So welcome to the show, Anodea.
Thank you, Yasmin. It's great to be here with you, and it was wonderful seeing you in person as well.
Likewise. So Anodea, to kick it off, can you tell us, for people who are listening, what is the energy body, and how would you, in your words, define energy?
Well, let's start with defining energy because the body is made up of that. So I define energy as our basic life force. Yogis call it prana, the martial artists and acupuncturists call it chi, Star Wars called it the force, Freud called it libido, but it's all describing the same thing, the life force that animates us, holds us upright, fuels our consciousness and our energy. The energy body, which is the assembled body that is subtle within your tissue. So we have our physical body, and then within each and every cell is a network of energy. We know it as the meridians, we know it as the chakras. In yoga, they call it the nadis. This is a whole organized system similar to your nervous system and your circulatory system, but it is a body of energy that inhabits your physical body.
So I want to dive into some of the details of what you described, because I think for people who are listening, some people might not know what the nadis are and kind of how the energy is orchestrated within our human body, right? So maybe to kick it off, we could talk a little bit about what the chakras are, and then talk about what the meridians and the nadis are.
Yeah, well, let's start with the chakras, and the chakras, which has really been my life's work. I describe them. Most people know them as energy centers. Well, okay, that's kind of vague. I describe them as centers of organization for the reception, the assimilation, the storage, and the expression of life force. So right now, your listeners are receiving these words. They're assimilating them. Maybe they're putting them into their own language, or maybe they're saying, well, that's true, or I understand that, or I don't understand that. Maybe they're taking notes, then they're storing it. And maybe after listening, they'll tell someone something they learned that would be expressing it. Well, we do this with food. We do this with breath. We do this with love, with images, with all the different chakra levels. We take in, we assimilate, we store, and we express. So the chakras are centers for organizing that, just like my office is a center for organizing my business.
Fascinating. So, and I love that description, because I've heard a lot of definitions of chakras and I haven't heard it expressed that way. So thank you. And what about the seven major chakras? I think that they've been talked a lot about in modern culture now, but I think for people who are listening in, there's a lot of people who might not even know, like, what are the seven chakras? Where are they in the physical body? And I know that we could probably spend hours on each of these chakras, like you do in your books, but maybe you could just describe at a very high level what they represent, what each one represents.
Yeah, let's take an overview of the system. As you mentioned, there are seven major chakras, and people talk about minor chakras in the hands or feet or above and below the body. But I like to deal with the seven major ones because they form a very elegant philosophical system, and they map directly onto the nervous system with the nerve ganglia that branch out of the body. So the first chakra is at the base of the spine. And the word chakra means wheel or disc, by the way. So it's a spinning wheel of energy. The one at the base of the spine in Sanskrit is called, which is the language of ancient India, is called Muladhara, which means root support, and its element is earth. So this is the one that's about your survival. It's about your instincts, and why you sweat when you're hot and you shiver when you're cold and you jump when there's a loud noise. It's about your instincts to survive and your fight or flight response. It's what keeps you alive. And it's said to be where the energy enters through the legs and feet up into the base of the spine to begin the journey. The second chakra, directly above that, is in the lower abdomen between the navel and the pubic bone, but right in the center of the body. So it relates to the low back, the hips, the sexual organs, the womb, the urinary system, and its element is water. And so this is about the fluid flow of our lives. It's about emotions and sexuality, what we feel, how energy moves through us, about having an erotic charge, which is a form that charge or energy can take in the body. And it keeps us fluid. It moves the fluids through the body. And we know that we're about 75% water. The third chakra is related to the element fire. It's in the solar plexus, and it's often called the power chakra. The energy arises in this chakra for the purpose of action. It wants to do something. And when we can do something successfully, I want to do this about this problem and I can actually do it and be effective, then we have a sense of power. When we feel like there's nothing we can do, or we don't know what to do, or we're afraid to do something because we might make a mistake, well, then that chakra gets shut down and we don't have a sense of power. Then we rise up into the heart chakra in the center of the chest, and that is related to the element air. Well, it's here that we breathe. It's here that the lungs expand and contract, and the heart beats the oxygen through the whole system. The heart chakra, as you might imagine, is the center of love. It's about relationship and balance and finding peace and compassion. And it's really the center of the whole chakra system with 3 chakras above and 3 below. So it's the center, it's the prime integrator of above and below, inside and outside, self and other, you and me. It integrates all of that. And that's what love does. It brings things into relationship. Then we rise up to chakra 5, which is in the throat. Its name, Vishuddha, means purification. And this is the narrowest part of the body where the chakras are. So this has to go through what I call a kind of bottleneck between the head and the body. So sometimes I call this the great translator. It translates our thoughts into actions, our actions into thoughts and memories, our feelings into awareness. It connects the brain to the body, and it's also about communication. How do we self-express? How do we listen? This is a prime example of, listening is taking in, making sense of it, storing it in our memory, and then expressing. So this is the 5th chakra located in the throat. Then we come up to what is commonly known as the third eye in the exact center of the head at brow level. This is chakra 6, and it is the element light. And so this chakra is about seeing, about recognizing. I like to say we realize when we can see with real eyes. It's about, recognizing what's out there, seeing the patterns, activating our intuition, our dreams, and creating a vision for your life. And then finally, we come up to the crown chakra, oriented to consciousness itself. And of course, consciousness is operating all the chakras. It's consciousness that allows us to feel and to love and to express ourselves. But in the 7th chakra, it's consciousness looking at consciousness itself, being aware that I am awareness. So it's pure awareness. It's connecting to our higher self, our higher power, downloading the divine, if you will. It's memory, it's thinking, it's intellectual awareness, spiritual awareness, and transcendence.
Thank you so much for walking us through the 7 chakras. And like I mentioned, we could probably spend hours on each, but I think it would be interesting just to note what are some common themes or patterns that you've noticed over, I don't know how many decades you've spent working on this, but I'm sure that there's probably been some themes that have emerged on maybe specific chakras that seem to be the focal point for a lot of people. So I'm curious, what have you found?
The main one that comes to mind is that most people are not truly grounded in their body. And we have a culture that doesn't support that very well. From a young age, when we want to be playing outside, we're told to sit at a desk and be very still and, make little squiggles on a paper with a pencil. And we have to sit on our physical energy. So the mind tends to dominate the body, and we're not in touch with our physical body. We're not really grounded. A lot of people have sexual issues, hang-ups of one kind or another, both men and women, and that can put the 2nd chakra out of balance. We block emotions because we're told, oh, don't be a crybaby, don't be so sensitive, don't rock the boat. And so we suppress our emotions, and that creates a lot of rigidity in the hips and the low back, even in the knees. And so a lot of people have that issue. I find women have a lot of issues with their power. Most people have some heart wounds, and a lot of people, I think probably second most common next to grounding would be the 5th chakra, where people have trouble expressing themselves.
So, and what about ways that we can work with our chakras and balance the energy in them? And maybe we could take the examples that you mentioned, the first, the grounding piece, and then the communication piece. And I guess I guess there's like a lot of issues with all of them. But yeah, I'm curious. Like maybe you could pick 1 or 2 chakras, and maybe ways or tools that we can actively implement into our lives, like today.
Well, I use a diagnostic system that says a chakra either has too much energy or too little, and this is what throws it out of balance. Too much energy results from a compensating pattern, like you didn't get enough love growing up, so you compensate by having to be in the center of attention all the time. That would be a compensating. Or you felt powerless growing up, so you want to be in control of everything. That would be an excessive third chakra. A deficient chakra results from an avoidant strategy. Oh, I don't want to feel all those feelings, so I'm just going to shut down my second chakra and close it off so I'm not in touch with it. Or I'm afraid to take my power. I might make a mistake or do something wrong. Or I'm afraid to speak up. And then I tamp down my fifth chakra, and then the energy doesn't get through as well. So the first step is kind of deciding, do I do too much of this or do I do too little? And once most people understand the chakras, they can answer that question pretty easily. Oh yeah, I'm always in control, or I'm never in control. So the excessive chakras need to discharge to come into balance. They're holding too much energy. They need to release. They need to let go. A person needs to not focus on that area quite as much, and instead focus on the deficient chakras by bringing energy in. Those chakras need to receive more. They need to keep more of the energy. And again, back to that definition of chakras receiving, assimilating, storing, and expressing. The deficient ones need to receive more. The excessive ones need to express more to get rid of it. And that's a way of bringing it back into balance. And I have whole sets of exercises for each chakra, some that are charging and bring energy in and energize, and some that are discharging, which is letting go of the energy. For example, discharging from your root chakra, you can just stamp your feet or kick your feet into the air, or just, shake your legs. And that's a discharge. Some people will be sitting there. I did another interview this morning, and she was talking about being in a doctor's office and everybody's leg is shaking back and forth as they're sitting in the waiting room. I said, well, that's a discharge. People really want to run away from that situation, and they're overcoming that. And so the energy to run away is being discharged by shaking their foot. So there's ways to charge and discharge each and every one of the chakras to bring them into more balance and more alignment with each other.
Have you seen any kind of major differences between genders when it comes to the chakra system, or have you not been tracking that?
Well, I have been tracking that, and I wouldn't say I have a completely equal playing field, because most of my workshops are about 80% women. But I do see that men are, typically less in touch with their feelings and more rigid in the second chakra, and often, very afraid to open their heart and be vulnerable. Women are often much shyer about speaking up. I could have 25% men in a workshop and they do 50% of the talking. Women are more afraid to take their power. And both genders tend to live in their head and have trouble grounding.
Fascinating. And what about, yoga, meditation, or energy healing? How are these modalities helpful when it comes to balancing our chakras? Like, what kind of yoga would you recommend? And specifically, how does yoga help?
Well, the chakra system came from the yoga tradition, so it originated there. And it's the yogis that discovered the chakras. Now, in the ancient times, it was usually meditation through which they accessed their chakras. They would focus on a particular part of the body. They might use an image. They might use a seed sound or a mantra. They didn't do a lot of physical hatha yoga like we do today. That's really a more recent development. But in the practice of yoga postures are designed to open the body to the free flow of prana, or what I'm calling charge or life force. And some postures are chest openers, so they're really good for the heart chakra. Some postures are hip openers, and they're good for the lower chakras. Some postures focus on strengthening the core, and that might be good for your third chakra. Some are strengthening the legs, and that's good for your grounding. Hatha yoga, or, the practice of postures, does not do quite as much for the upper chakras. That is more accessed through meditation and stilling the mind and finding longer and more states of emptiness and transcendence.
It's interesting. I've been doing a lot of Kundalini yoga, and I definitely noticed that the energy in that practice is really bringing up the energy into the top three chakra systems. And I'm curious if you know about Kundalini yoga and how that's different from the other yogas you mentioned.
Yeah, there is a difference. Kundalini yoga is primarily designed to raise the energy up the spine, up the chakras, and bring that energy up into the higher consciousness. And it's not so much about conditioning the body or opening the body or stretching the ligaments as it is in Hatha yoga. My personal belief is that it's safer to actually open each part of the body so that when the Kundalini energy wakes up and arises, the body is capable of carrying it. Because it's sort of like turning on a very high voltage into, piece of electronic equipment. You can overwhelm and burn out the equipment if it doesn't have the capacity to absorb that high voltage. And so I feel like Hatha yoga prepares the body, and Kundalini then stimulates the awakening of the Kundalini energy, the intense energy that arises up the spine.
I love that. It's really good to know. And so, Anodea, what about the meridians and the nadis? Can you talk to us about what they are and how they work with the chakra system?
Well, if you think of the world, then you see that there's highways that connect the various cities. And in those cities, you have plumbing, you have electrical wiring, you have phone cords, you have streets for delivering things on, driving around, you have paths to walk. All of those are ways to transport some kind of energy. If it's plumbing, it's liquid. If it's electricity, if it's wiring, it's electricity. So in the body, we have that too. And just as we have a nervous system and a circulatory system, we also have a system of meridians, which are like highways to deliver and move the life force energy through different parts of the body, deliver it to the organs so they can use it, and just distribute it through the whole body. Nadis, the word is Sanskrit and it means motion. And nadis are very similar to meridians, but it's not the same map. They don't chart the same course. So you might say one is plumbing and one is electrical, but actually they both handle energy. So, some say there's 72,000 nadis in the body, but the main nadis that yogis work with in the chakras are the sushumna, which is the one that goes straight up the center of the body and takes you all the way up to the crown. And then the Ida and the Pingala, that means moon and sun. Ida means moon and Pingala means sun. And those are the figure eight lines that you often see going around the chakras in a lot of those pictures that you see from the yoga tradition.
Fascinating. And so you mentioned earlier the elements in each of the chakras. Like you mentioned, the second chakra had the water element. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means, for each of the chakras, like why they would have the elements and why the elements are also important to our own kind of vitality and health?
Well, in my years of working with the chakra system, I find that the elements as a single word describe more of what that chakra is about than anything else that you can say. Earth is very different from water. Earth is solid. It has corners and edges and it holds its form. Water is liquid and it's always moving and taking the shape of whatever vessel it's in. Fire is radiating and it's hot and it burns and transforms things. Air is what we breathe. Air is invisible and yet we're enveloped in it. Sound is, how we communicate. Light is how we see. And consciousness is how we think. And so these seven elements in just a simple word describe the essence of that chakra. Like, the first chakra being earth, which is solid. This is where we want to become solid in our lives. We want to solidify. We want to become solid in our finances, solid in our relationships, solid in who we are. We want to flow in the second chakra. Water wants to flow. And so they describe very much, what we are and how we are. You could say, if you were diagnosing an excessive or deficient third chakra, does someone have too much fire or do they have too little fire? Someone that's cold all the time and, just doesn't have much energy in their presentation, that would be a deficient third chakra. And somebody that's always hot and burning up and burning out in their life, well, they have an excessive third chakra. So, we can say we're full of hot air or we can barely get a breath. So these elements are ways to work with the chakra. They represent an archetypal level of how each chakra operates and also its relationship to the body.
Fascinating. I want to actually switch to the creativity piece of chakras. You wrote a book that I read many, many years ago called Creating on Purpose, the Spiritual Technology of Manifesting Through the Chakras. It was actually, I believe, co-written with Lion Goodman.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
And I want to talk about, how can we use our chakras and the knowledge of our chakra systems to be more creative on purpose?
Yes. Well, creating on purpose referred to deliberately creating your life because we are all creating our lives. It's just some people are not taking power over that. And also creating in harmony with your life purpose. And so as I was writing my books, and I did that while, raising 4 kids and running an organization and doing a lot of things, people said, how do you manifest so much? And when I thought about it, I realized I took the downward path through the chakras. Most people don't think about that. They think about going up to higher consciousness. But the downward path that begins in higher consciousness, connecting to source, connecting to spirit, downloading instructions, getting an idea, a conception. All life begins with a conception. And then taking that idea from my seventh chakra to my sixth chakra and turning it into a vision. What would that look like? So I have an idea. I want to build a house. Well, what kind of house? I imagine, it might look like this. It might look like that. I think of houses I've seen that I like. And then after I've thought about that and imaged it, then I take it into the communication. I find an architect and I sit down and I tell the architect, here's the kind of house I would like to build. It would have this many doors and it would be this color and it would be this size. And I communicate it and we have a dialogue about it. And then I have to find relationships to build that house. I have to find a relationship with a real estate agent to buy the land, with a contractor to build the house, with the building department, with a banker to give me a loan to build the house. So many, many different relationships that help something come into being. And of course, in the third chakra, there's things you have to do to build a house. Even if you're not actually doing the hammering, you have to make phone calls and you have to turn papers in and you have to, go to the bank and you have to manage the whole thing. So there's things you have to do. And a lot of it is bringing things together, bringing together the boards and the windows and the nails and the people and the ideas until finally you have a physical form of a house that you can move into. And that is the physical manifestation, but everything that manifests begins as someone's idea.
I love the downward path. I've never heard that before, but that makes so much sense. And I think in some ways it feels like the flow of energy kind of is easier, right? Because you're already getting like the blueprint, the architectural kind of blueprint, and then you got to put it into form where people usually work with the material world and then move it into, or like sort of try to grasp things from the other chakras, or maybe not at all, right? In many cases. So I want to talk about She Rises because I think this is your newest work. I got a chance to also see some of it come to life in the Bay Area, and it was such a delight. Can you tell us about this body of work and also what's come out of it and why you created it?
Well, as a therapist and a teacher and also a priestess who conducts rituals and ceremonies, I've long been aware of the power of archetypes. And archetypal education is not very much part of the culture today. And I think we've lost something very rich and meaningful when we've lost our connection to myth and archetypes. And if you study Jung and his talking about archetypes, most of the ones he lists are male. But women have archetypes too, some of which have been lost throughout history and we hardly think of anymore, like the priestess or the oracle or the midwife. You know, they're ancient, or the initiator. Um, they need to be brought back into consciousness and connected. Some of the archetypes are just emerging, like the activist. You know, when I was growing up, I never heard the word activist. But now we have people marching the streets and organizing, and we have activists, 60% of which are women. We also have the androgyne, which is the gender fluid person. They may not identify clearly as masculine or feminine, or they may change from one gender to another. That's an emerging archetype that's coming more common in the culture. So I decided to create this deck of archetypes. There's 38 in this set. And instead of writing a little book that you do tarot readings and then you go to the book and read about it, archetypes really have their power when they are enacted. They're not a pretty picture just to look at, but they come to life when they're enacted. And so I started sharing these mostly in the beginning in circles of women who would pick an archetype and take it to their seat. And I took the book and I put it on the archetype card itself. So each archetype has 3 pages of writing attached to it. And it's like a greeting card. So they could take it to their seat. They could all read about their archetypes at the same time. And then I would invite them to stand up and read the first part, which is written in the I voice. I am the priestess, and I am a living conduit between the goddess and humanity. I am the visionary, and I am the harbinger of the future. I am the mother. I am the maiden, and I promise. It's whatever the archetype is speaking. And when women stood up and enacted this, a power came through them. Something came to life, and you could feel it in the room. And so then they began to bring men to the circles. And one time our mutual friend, Gary Malkin, came to a circle and he said, you really should put music to this and people would get into it more. And then that led to me producing a live event for my 70th birthday in which people could rehearse and memorize and get costumes, and Gary's music, supported each archetype. And we did a stage performance of half the archetypes. 38 would have been too much for an evening. And that was what you were present at. And it was, gave me a vision of what, maybe this can be enacted in many cities around the world.
Amazing. I really appreciate the tarot and the archetypal quality to this work, because I think it also gives us like a symbolism that we can work with and understand, right? When we don't have words sometimes. I'm curious, of all the archetypes, which is the archetype that you feel most aligned with, or maybe a handful of archetypes that you resonate with, at this point in your life, especially, having just turned 70 and kind of moving, forward in a different way. So I'm just curious, is there 1 or 2 or 3 that resonate deeply for you?
Well, certainly some were easier to write than others because I had lived them. If I had to pick one, I would say the visionary. That's what I am and do in life. Is I'm a visionary. I'm always looking to the future. I'm always looking to how can we make this better? How can we make it more exciting? I'm a very visual person. I do visual art and I love to create beauty. So I would say that's my prime one, but I've been the priestess. I've been the mother. I've been the counselor and the healer. I've been the maestra, the scholar. I've been the gardener. I am the gardener. I do a lot of that. In some ways, I've been the weaver, weaving together different philosophies. I've been the spinner, spinning a tale. Those are some of the ones that I've lived.
And Anodea, what attracted you to this body of work? And, can you talk to us about your own journey and experience, both like when it comes to bringing the whole chakra system and energy system to life, and then now with She Rises?
Well, the chakras came to me back in 1975. And when I first read the word, a shot of energy went through me. And somehow I just knew in that moment that my destiny was to write a book on the chakras. In fact, I was sitting in meditation and I had an out of body experience. And I looked down and there was a book on the chakras written by me in my lap. And so I said, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. I wish instructions came that clear all the time, but that was one time when they did, but they haven't really since. And my goal then was to bring the chakras from the ancient Eastern philosophy into Western culture in a way that we Westerners could understand it as an integrated and balancing system. Not something where you just sit in meditation all day and try to go up to the crown, but something that gives us a formula for wholeness on each and every level of our lives. And so my goal has been really to Westernize the chakra system. I suppose you could call it cultural appropriation, but I think that it's really served people well. The She Rises came about. Well, I had always worked with archetypes, but back in 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost the American election for president, who was a highly, highly qualified candidate, one of the most qualified candidates in general, let alone women, that we'd had in a long time. And, I followed the news closely and I read all the comments about her. Oh, she's too brassy. Let's analyze her hemline. How much did she spend on that haircut? She's too feminine. She couldn't be commander in chief. She's too masculine. I don't trust her. And these were all projections onto what happens to a woman when she tries to take leadership, because our models and archetypes for leadership in this world are largely masculine. They're about command and control and being very certain about things, certainty. And many women don't relate to that. That's not how we lead. We need different archetypes to guide us because women lead differently than men. And many of the ways women lead are not recognized. For instance, the shepherdess is one of the cards in the deck. And she's the one that makes sure everyone's taken care of, that no one's left behind. She, if it's in a classroom, she's attending to the student that is way, doesn't understand and gives a little special attention. At the meeting, she's makes sure everybody gets the minutes. She's an important part of any organization, but she's not given credit as a kind of leader because she leads from behind. It's a different way. And so I started, seeing what these archetypes were, and they just started coming through me. They would wake me up in the middle of the night. The trailblazer got me up in a dream and said, I need to be in your deck. You don't have me included. I need you to write me right now. And I got up at 2 a.m. and I came down to my computer and I started writing the trailblazer. And it wasn't since Wheels of Life that I worked on a project that wild horses could not take me away from it. I wanted to work on it every minute. I worked on it on Sundays when I'm usually not on the computer, and at night when I usually log off. So it was something that was coming through me.
Wow. That's so powerful that you get these insights also kind of in the middle of the night, and also incorporate new archetypes that have not even traditionally kind of existed in the modern zeitgeist. And so I because I had never heard of a lot of them that you brought in to your deck. So I really appreciate the sort of innovative piece of that, and also honoring that the way that we work is different than the masculine, and yet most of our work is built on this patriarchal culture. So it feels like we're a little bit lost trying to lead with the feminine. So I really, really appreciate that so much. I'm curious, what's been the response from folks since you launched this? What has come from this body of work, and what do you hope also to come from it?
Well, just yesterday, I finished my first training. It was an online training of She Rises leaders. And I'm training women how to put on live events and lead circles where they enact the cards. Because like I say, you can buy a set of cards and you can put them on your shelf. But the power of archetypes is in their enactment. When you become the archetype, it loans you a certain kind of power. And archetypes as, kind of mental constructs, they can't do things in the world. They need our bodies to do it. So the archetype has a role to play in changing and balancing society. And then it will give us its power in exchange for fulfilling that. So, the visionary will give me her power in exchange for putting vision out into the world. The mother archetype will give you power when you're mothering in exchange for doing the act of mothering and birthing something. So, the response has been enormous in terms of people actually experiencing the cards and experiencing in their own bodies and psyche what awakens when they read out loud and enact. Read it with feeling, read it with music, read it with motion in the body, read it with movement, enacting the archetype and having something come alive in them that wasn't alive before. And they go away feeling empowered. It's like without archetypes, we live a very impoverished existence. When we have these archetypes, our existence becomes rich. They're like outfits we can put on. And if you only have one outfit in your closet, it's kind of boring. But, you want a party dress and you want your, dancing clothes and you want your formal business suit and, you want these different things that you can enrich your life with.
Yeah. And, as you say that, I'm also like just honoring the feminine nature of energy. Like, we didn't get into this, but even our hormonal system is so different than the kind of 24/7 testosterone driven cycle. So I think that piece also for me feels like a very creative outlet for us to understand the ebbs and flows of what it is to be female, to be woman. So Anodea, what has changed since the pandemic? What has kind of come into your consciousness and shifted your way of thinking about your previous work and, where we're going as a society?
Well, prior to the pandemic, I was flying all over the world teaching workshops, and I flew once or twice a month for 25 years. And I was frankly getting tired of dealing with airports and airplanes and late flights and canceled flights and all of that, and wondering, how am I going to transition from this? Because in that world, you've always put your schedule a year and a half in advance, and by the time you get there, you don't feel like doing it, but you said yes to it a long time ago. So then the pandemic came along and all that shut down. All the retreat centers I was teaching at were closed. All the live events shut down. And that was when I wrote The She Rises. So I thought, well, of course, I've brought some of my teaching into Zoom. But it gave me a chance to settle back. I think if I was traveling that much, I wouldn't have had the concentrated time to write The She Rises and create that. So that's one thing that changed. And now, having just turned 70, I'm starting to travel and teach again, but on a very limited basis. I'm going to do it 3 or 4 times a year, and that's it. I have too much trouble with the way flying impacts climate change, and I can't, in good conscience, just keep doing that. And, there is Zoom now, and there are other ways to reach people. So that's one thing. I was actually excited during the pandemic, seeing everything slow down and seeing less traffic on the roads and seeing the air get clear and finding that people were finding other ways to connect. And I think that that's good for the environment. I think it gave birth to a different kind of interconnectedness in the world. And now that we're pretty much past it, we can come out and be with each other again, which also is important. Now we have, this hybrid online and together. So there's so many more ways to share information. And I think it's just the evolution of the species as a whole organism of, going through a kind of chrysalis stage where we were compressed into the chrysalis as, the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis to become a butterfly, and that we are reorganizing at a core level so that we can later come out and spread our wings and fly.
Oh, I love that. Amazing. Yeah, it's so interesting to see, how people have navigated the pandemic and whether it's been kind of valuable for their life or, or not. And so I want to also talk a little bit about why you think that this subject is so important and why you decided to devote your kind of life's work to this, well, at least the chakra system and the energy system. And now She Rises, why this body of work?
Well, as I mentioned, the chakra system is a formula for wholeness. And it's a formula for wholeness, not only for the individual, like if I can address my life on the grounding and the emotional level and the action and the relationship and all that, and I can address each one of those levels, I have a good recipe, as it were, for becoming whole and balanced. But I also see that it applies to the culture. If we want to create an optimal society, then we want one that is, connected to wisdom, connected, is guided by spirit, connected to wisdom traditions, that is intelligent. We want a society that has a vision and creates beauty. What if we walked out of our homes in the city streets and everything was beautiful? What a different state of consciousness that would create. If we want a society that's based on truth and rhythmically coherent, we want a society that has a lot of love and allows people to love who they will and allows love to prosper and has compassion. We want a society in which people feel empowered. It's your third chakra. Most people in our society today do not feel empowered. They feel disempowered and helpless and hopeless. We want a society that empowers pleasure, that our days are pleasant, that we are pleasant to each other, that we're pleasing each other, that life is a pleasurable experience. And we want a society that is grounded and connected with nature, that is environmentally responsible. And if we have all those levels, it's a good map for creating a new way to live that maps not only onto the collective, but also onto the personal. And there's not very many systems that do both.
Hmm. Yes, amen. Amen to that. So, Anodea, what sort of things have surprised you the most looking back, on this journey?
Gosh, what has surprised me? One thing I suppose surprised me, though, in thinking back, it shouldn't have, is I've taught all over the world that everybody's got the same problems. It doesn't seem to matter whether I'm in China or India or Europe or the US or Canada. It doesn't matter whether people are black or white or Asian or what they are. It doesn't even matter so much whether they're male or female. We all have the same issues, regardless of our culture. And people just want to know how to love more. They want to know how to be healthy. They want to know how to have fun. They want to know how to have sovereignty over their life. They want to be connected to spirit. And the chakra system really covers all of that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very important point. That there's this universal theme that we all, are humans who actually want the same thing, regardless of where we are in the world and our cultures and demographics and geographies. So I really appreciate that. And Anodea, to wrap up, what do you want to tell our listeners about their health, wellness, well-being? What's your main takeaway for people who are listening right now? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to go kind of take action on today?
Well, this life force that I talk about, each of us has a life force, and I think we are seeking our aliveness more even than we're seeking the meaning of life. When we have that aliveness, we don't ask what's the meaning of life. We know. We don't have to ask. So your life force is golden. It is your treasure. And you want to free it up so that you can have it and it can flow freely through all of your body, all your chakras, so it can take you on your journey. And we don't want to lock it up and we don't want to discharge it and get rid of it. We want to harvest it into our tissues. That creates more awareness, more aliveness, more well-being, better immune system, more health. And I think it antidotes aging as well. So I think that if you can just befriend your aliveness, not look at it as anxiety, say, oh, that's my aliveness. What's it trying to do? And how can I help it do what it is arising to do? Or be, or say.
Powerful. Yes. I love that takeaway. Really harness your life force, your aliveness. I call it enthusiasm.
Yes.
But it's
And the root
beautiful.
of enthusiasm is theos, which means God.
Oh,
So it's to
amazing.
be filled with the divine. That's what
Amazing.
the word really means.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Anodea, thank you so much for your time. Are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you, your work, and what you're doing next?
Absolutely. I've created lots of them in my 70 years. I have, a number of books that can give you a basic idea of all the things I'm talking about, which you can find on my website, anodeajudith.com. I have also online self-paced workshops that are video, little videos, 15, 20 minutes each, all put together in a course that you can go through on your own. I have one on charge in the energy body. I have one on the architecture of the soul, which is what I call the chakras. I have a couple others. I have one on creating on purpose. And so you can download those, you can buy those and download them and just go at your own pace. And they have little assignments and little videos and things to do. So that's another way of working through it. And I teach live workshops, and I'm doing things always online as well.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, great. Well, we'll include that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Anodea. This was so lovely and so inspirational.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Oh, thank you. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about the chakra system with Anodea Judith, and you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.